The Star Wars Expanded Universe EU, a collection of novels, comics, games, and other media created before Disney's acquisition of Lucasfilm, represents an unparalleled facet of storytelling that is both foundational and critical to the survival of the Star Wars legacy. These works expanded upon the beloved galaxy far, far away, diving into complexities that the films themselves only hinted at, offering a rich tapestry of characters, histories, and cultures that gave Star Wars its depth and staying power. Unfortunately, Disney's decision to relegate the EU to Legends status in favor of a simplified, streamlined canon has exposed cracks in their storytelling approach. By ignoring the EU, Disney has left a significant portion of Star Wars fans disillusioned, while their newer works often lack the thematic richness and intricate world-building that defined the original continuity. At the heart of Star Wars lies its ability to create a universe that feels alive and expansive. George Lucas's films laid the groundwork for this, but it was the EU that gave it flesh and blood. Novels like Timothy Zahn's Heir to the Empire trilogy introduced layered villains like Grand Admiral Thrawn, whose intellect and strategic genius made him a formidable adversary. The EU didn't just focus on battles between the light and dark sides of the Force, it explored shades of gray, challenging simplistic dichotomies. Characters such as Mara Jade, a former Emperor's Hand who evolves into a hero, showcased transformative arcs that resonated deeply with fans. Moreover, the EU provided depth to the galaxy's politics, cultures, and histories. It wasn't just about the Jedi and Sith, but also the struggles of ordinary beings navigating a chaotic galaxy. Planets like Coruscant became more than backdrops, they were living, breathing hubs of activity, where intrigue and complexity thrived. The EU tackled questions of morality, the cost of war, and the delicate balance between freedom and order. Such themes were often presented in multi-layered narratives that required investment from the audience, rewarding them with profound insights and emotional payoffs. Disney's Star Wars, in contrast, has often been accused of skimming the surface, offering stories that prioritize spectacle over substance. Take, for instance, the sequel trilogy, Disney's flagship contribution to the canon. While visually stunning, these films faltered in delivering coherent and satisfying narratives. Rey, the trilogy's protagonist, is emblematic of Disney's struggle with depth. Despite her potential, her journey feels hollow compared to the intricate character arcs found in the EU. Her quick mastery of the Force, without the rigorous training or inner struggles faced by characters like Luke Skywalker in the original trilogy, left many fans questioning her development. In the EU, Luke's journey as a Jedi Master was far more nuanced. He grappled with the burden of rebuilding the Jedi Order, the temptations of the dark side, and the personal losses that shaped him. This careful balance of vulnerability and strength made him an enduring figure. Another critical loss in Disney's storytelling approach is their failure to capture the philosophical depth of the Force. The EU didn't just treat the Force as a tool for flashy battles, it explored its spiritual dimensions, the consequences of its misuse, and its connection to the galaxy's very fabric. Series like the Jedi Academy trilogy or the Darth Bane novels delved into the intricacies of Jedi and Sith ideologies, presenting them as more than opposing factions. In contrast, Disney's portrayal of the Force often feels reductive, a convenient plot device rather than a source of existential reflection. The EU also excelled in creating a sense of continuity and interconnectedness that spanned decades. Characters like Han Solo and Leia Organa didn't remain static, their stories evolved naturally, reflecting the passage of time and the consequences of their choices. The birth of their children Jaina, Jacen, and Anakin Solo added layers of generational storytelling, showcasing the struggles of legacy and the burden of carrying forward the ideals of the Rebel Alliance. Jacen Solo's transformation into the Sith Lord Darth Caedus is a prime example of the EU's willingness to take risks, presenting a tragic arc that resonates with themes of hubris, sacrifice, and redemption. Disney's Star Wars, on the other hand, has struggled with continuity and thematic cohesion. The sequel trilogy suffered from a lack of unified vision, resulting in abrupt shifts in tone and narrative direction between The Force Awakens, The Last Jedi, and The Rise of Skywalker. While individual moments in these films may be compelling, they lack the connective tissue that binds them into a cohesive whole. This fragmented storytelling contrasts sharply with the EU's meticulous approach, where authors worked collaboratively to maintain consistency and expand upon established lore. Beyond storytelling, The EU succeeded in fostering a sense of community and belonging among fans. It invited readers to become part of the Star Wars universe, to imagine themselves as Jedi, smugglers, or rebels fighting against tyranny. It encouraged creativity and debate, inspiring fan works, role-playing games, and discussions that enriched the fandom. Disney's top-down approach to Star Wars has, at times, alienated these passionate fans who feel their contributions and knowledge of the lore are being dismissed. By sidelining the EU, Disney risks eroding the goodwill and dedication of a fan base that has kept Star Wars alive for decades. A further point of contention is Disney's over-reliance on nostalgia and safe storytelling choices. Instead of embracing the spirit of innovation and risk-taking that defined the EU, Disney has often retread familiar ground. The return of Emperor Palpatine in The Rise of Skywalker is a glaring example of this. Instead of exploring new threats or building upon the foundations laid by the EU, Disney chose to recycle a villain whose story had already reached a natural conclusion. This decision not only undermined the impact of Return of the Jedi, but also highlighted a lack of originality in their narrative approach. This reliance on nostalgia and recycling old elements has led to a broader critique of Disney's shallow storytelling approach. The Star Wars universe, as depicted in the EU, was teeming with originality and a willingness to take risks. It introduced new threats like the Yuuzhan Vong, an extragalactic species immune to the Force, whose invasion shook the galaxy to its core and challenged the Jedi in unprecedented ways. This saga, spanning the New Jedi Order series, showcased the resilience and adaptability of beloved characters while introducing new ones who left their mark on the legacy. It was bold storytelling that expanded the horizons of what Star Wars could be. Disney, by contrast, seems hesitant to stray too far from familiar territory. While shows like The Mandalorian and Andor have demonstrated a willingness to explore new ideas, they are the exception rather than the rule. Much of Disney's output has felt constrained by a need to appeal to the broadest audience possible, often at the expense of depth and creativity. The sequel trilogy's reliance on a new Death Star Starkiller base and the recycled themes of rebellion versus empire are emblematic of this cautious approach. Rather than charting new paths, Disney appears content to repackage the familiar, banking on the audience's nostalgia to carry the story. This is not to say that all of Disney's contributions are without merit. As mentioned, The Mandalorian has provided a refreshing take on the galaxy, focusing on smaller, character-driven stories that delve into the underexplored fringes of the Star Wars universe. Rogue One also stands out as a film that embraced the gritty realities of rebellion, offering a more grounded perspective on the struggle against the Empire. However, these projects succeed largely because they deviate from the mainline saga, allowing creators more freedom to take risks and experiment. They are, in many ways, more in line with the spirit of the EU than Disney's core canon offerings. Another area where Disney's approach falters is in its handling of villains. The EU excelled at creating antagonists who were not merely evil for the sake of being evil but were complex individuals with understandable motivations. Thrawn, for example, was driven by a desire to protect his people, the Chiss, and his tactical brilliance made him a captivating foe. Even Sith lords like Darth Bane, whose rule of two philosophy shaped the Sith's future, were given rich backstories that provided insight into their choices and ambitions. In contrast, Disney's villains often lack this complexity. Kylo Ren had the potential to be a multi-dimensional character, torn between the light and dark sides of the Force. However, his arc was hampered by inconsistent writing, with his motivations and development often feeling rushed or underexplored. Snoke, initially introduced as a mysterious and powerful antagonist, was unceremoniously discarded in The Last Jedi, leaving audiences with more questions than answers. Even the return of Palpatine felt hollow, a desperate attempt to inject a sense of stakes into a story that struggled to establish its own identity. The sidelining of the EU also deprives fans of the interconnected and generational storytelling that made Star Wars so compelling. In the EU, the galaxy's history was a living, breathing entity, with events from one era influencing those in another. The tales of the Old Republic, for example, provided a rich backdrop that informed the struggles of later generations. Characters like Revan and Bastila Shan added layers to the Jedi and Sith mythos, while the Tales of the Jedi comics explored the ancient roots of these rival orders. This deep sense of history gave the Star Wars universe a sense of scale and weight that is largely absent in Disney's interpretation. Furthermore, Disney's treatment of legacy characters has drawn significant criticism. Luke Skywalker, Han Solo, and Leia Organa, who were given meaningful arcs in the EU, are often reduced to shadows of their former selves in the sequel trilogy. Luke's portrayal in The Last Jedi, while bold in some respects, felt like a betrayal to many fans who had followed his journey in the EU, where he became a wise and compassionate Jedi Master dedicated to rebuilding the Order. The EU's Luke struggled with failures and temptations, but ultimately remained true to his ideals, a beacon of hope for the galaxy. Disney's Luke, in contrast, is depicted as a bitter recluse who abandons his friends and responsibilities, a stark departure that alienated many longtime fans. Han and Leia fare no better. Their tumultuous yet loving relationship, which was central to their arcs in the EU, is replaced by a narrative of estrangement and tragedy in the sequels. Their children, who were pivotal to the EU's generational storytelling, are erased in favor of a single, conflicted son whose arc feels derivative of Anakin Skywalker's. By discarding the EU's carefully constructed legacy, Disney squandered the opportunity to build upon the foundation laid by decades of storytelling. Ultimately, the Star Wars expanded universe represents the heart and soul of what made this galaxy far, far away resonate with millions. It was a testament to the power of collaborative storytelling, where authors, artists, and creators work together to expand and enrich the universe. By relegating the EU to the sidelines, Disney has not only alienated a significant portion of the fan base, but also deprived itself of a treasure trove of narratives that could have elevated their new canon. For Star Wars to endure as more than just a brand, it must reconnect with the elements that made it a cultural phenomenon. This means embracing the complexity, risk-taking, and thematic depth that define the EU. Without these qualities, Disney's Star Wars risks becoming a hollow shell, a series of flashy but forgettable spectacles that fail to capture the imagination and passion of its audience. The EU was essential to the survival of the Star Wars legacy because it understood what made this universe truly great: its ability to inspire, challenge, and transport us to a galaxy filled with endless possibilities. To dismiss it is to undermine the very foundation of Star Wars itself.